I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street.
Welcome back, folks. This episode is with Peter Curtis Pardini. Peter first made a name for himself by working with the band Chicago on a few projects, which culminated in Peter directing the official Chicago documentary. In this episode, we talk about, of course, working with Chicago and how that got started and what it was like. We also talk about the hurdles of the distribution process once the film is complete for any filmmaker. We touch on some of Peter's other projects, including the film Black Cat and his upcoming film Rolling Thunder. Also, he gives us some secrets about how to get your film into film festivals. And then finally, we wrap up talking about Fat, a documentary that Peter is working on with previous guest of the show and NSNG guru, Vinnie Tortorich. Make sure you check the show notes for a link to the Black Cat film and a link to the trailers for Rolling Thunder and Fat, a documentary. You're going to enjoy those, guys. Check them out. Filmmaker, director, Peter Pardini.
Yeah, talk to me.
Peter Pardini, welcome to Fascination Street Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me. I appreciate it. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I cannot complain. It is a good day, and I'm very excited to talk to you, man.
Absolutely.
So, first, what I want to do is talk about sort of where you grew up and what kind of got you into the film business. Is that cool?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Fresno, California, first 18 years of my life before I went to college, but I can really pinpoint it to watching Raiders of the Lost Ark on TV. I don't remember exactly how old I was, probably like 5 or 6, and it was truck chase where he's being dragged behind the truck in that chase with the Nazis. That scene actually is where I was like, okay, I want to figure out how they did that. I want to make movies. It just kind of grew from there. I was lucky enough to have some friends that I grew up with that we could make movies together. And we kind of did that in grade school. It was, the typical kind of dumb stuff where we would play around with the camera and try to figure out how to do special effects. And it ultimately just led to us making more movies and then I ended up going to film school. And, I know I'm condensing it a lot, but it all culminated when I graduated from film school and got a chance to work with the band Chicago and go on the road with them, and the rest is history.
So let's talk about that. Obviously, that's sort of a big part of your career so far. How did you first get started? So for people who don't know, Peter did, I guess you did a few things with Chicago. Can you talk about how that all got started?
So my uncle happened to be one of the newer members of the group, and he became a member in 2009, and then in 2010, they were recording a Christmas album. And one of the original founding members, Lee Loughnane, he was trying to find a company to come out and do behind-the-scenes things, just to show them making the album pretty much. But all these companies, they hear at Chicago, they hear 10 days, and the price tag's really, really high when you kind of know what you're getting into. And so they weren't going to pay that much money to do a behind-the-scenes thing. So he bought 2 cameras and kind of asked guys in the band, hey, do you know anybody who's young who might want to do this for hopefully nothing, just as experience? And my uncle and my aunt were there, and they knew I had just graduated from film school, and they said, well, Peter's a huge fan of Chicago. I could guarantee you that as long as you just bring him out here and put him up, he'll do it. So, of course, at 23 years old, that was not a decision that needed much mulling. So I went out and filmed their Christmas album, edited something together. It was only a couple weeks. And a few months later, they asked me to go on the road with them full time and actually hired me as an employee. So I worked with Chicago for about 2.5 years before I pitched the idea of doing a feature-length documentary about their career, because Lee and I had talked about the documentary, The History of the Eagles, and thought it was so well made, and with my connections with the crews that I've worked with before, and we could make our own documentary and not spend that much money to do it. because it's all in-house and I'm doing it and everyone's on the same page. So we made that documentary, and it took about 3.5 years from conception to release when it came out in January of 2017 on CNN. So it was a long journey, and I'm still, I still do work for Chicago, and I always will, because they kind of got me. They got me my start, gave me my start. I've basically told them that if I'm ever available, even if I'm directing huge movies, I'm going to come out and do stuff for them, because I really feel like I owe them for the rest of my life.
Well, I can certainly understand that. And so you did like the World Tour 2011 thing. And so that actually was screened nationwide through Fathom Events. Is that right?
That's correct. 2 people from Fathom Events had come to, I think they're based in Colorado. I could be wrong, but they came to a show at Red Rocks when we were there. And they got backstage and they kind of pitched the idea of, that was less than a year after I had done the original Christmas album thing, and they were not releasing their Christmas album until that, I think, October. And they thought it would be a great idea to do a Fathom event for Chicago World Tour 2011 mixed with Christmas album. So that led to me going on the road another 2-3 months, getting more footage, editing something together. And it was pretty crazy for me, because I went from being practically unemployed after college, because the economy was really bad then. I had just graduated. There were no film. You can't just go and get a film job. It doesn't really work like that. And college doesn't really do much for you in terms of that. And I was working. I found like minimum wage jobs, but with a college degree, it was kind of like a really depressing thing. It's like going through all this stuff and I can't find work at this time. And so I went from that to getting the opportunity to go out with Chicago to being a 24-year-old with a feature film nationwide in much less than a year, which it's partially my ability to make things quickly, but I make no bones about it. Like, that was Chicago's name allowing me to have instant recognition for basically my first real project. So it kind of happened overnight in that way, but I've learned over the years too that I'm still a filmmaker that's trying to get my stuff out there, and I'm fortunate enough to have these contacts, but at the same time, it's not an overnight success in that you're just set for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
Sure. So what did that feel like? I mean, I know that's kind of a random, maybe even a dumb question, but you basically went from, it sounds like, being super let down about your prospects coming out of school to now you're touring worldwide with one of the biggest bands that has ever been, making a film for them.
Yeah. When you go through life, a lot of the time you look back on things and wish you had been more in the moment and more happy with what you had at that time, rather than looking back on it and saying, oh, I wish I had that back. But it is one of the times where I knew when I was doing it how lucky I was. I didn't want to bother anybody when I was on the road. I mean, I got to travel with the band starting out. I mean, I thought for sure I wouldn't be going to their hotels and they're on their bus. And it was the best thing that could have happened for me, because it wasn't a dangerous situation. I think that it would have been a bad thing had I gone out on the road and it been with a band that maybe was way more into partying or doing drugs or drinking and all that stuff. I was with guys who had been through that already 40 years previous, and it was just a really good environment. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, and anytime anything's picked up for me, especially with this new movie that I've got coming out, it's that if you surround yourself with people who are good at what they do and are go-getters and are successful, if you are in the moment and paying attention to that and accepting that, then you can't really screw it up if you just show up and do the work. So for me, it felt amazing to be on the road with Chicago, but at the same time, it's like, here's the guy who wrote Color My World, and there's the guy who wrote Saturday in the Park, and we're just watching some movie on the bus together. It was really the movie Almost Famous, but without any of the sex or drugs. But it was still really fun and a great learning experience to see these guys who'd been around for almost 50 years at that point, and just learning from that and seeing how they carry themselves.
Well, if I learned anything from that movie, Almost Famous, it's that every single band, when they're on tour in a bus, they all get together and sing Tiny Dancer. Did that happen?
Yeah, that was a thing after every show. We would do that after every show.
Oh, okay, great. So if you had to
It is a prerequisite.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So if you had to pick one person from Chicago who was a golden god, who would it be?
What do you mean by golden god?
That's another line from Almost Famous.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, he stands on the roof and he says, "I am a golden god," and then he falls off the roof or whatever.
That would have probably been all of the originals at some point in the 70s, but none of them are like that now. No one's standing on a roof at a stranger's house jumping into pools anymore.
Those times have passed.
Yes, they have.
So you had this opportunity to be with this, iconic band, and that was cool. But then after you filmed the movie and you edit it and you put it all together and package it up, how did distribution work? And were you surprised at the level of pain in the assery that entailed?
Yes, it was a pain in the ass for sure. I learned a lot by doing that movie because not only were there all the people I interviewed where you have to deal with all the different personalities. You have to talk to people who aren't in the band anymore, who you want to interview, and you have to convince them that I'm not doing a hit piece here, trust me. I'm getting to the distribution thing, but this is important because I had to deal with no person ever coming to me and telling me how to edit the movie. Like, I was lucky that I had Final Cut. It's in the contract that we eventually got with the distributor. My name's in there as having Final Cut, and that doesn't happen on people's first movies, and especially if you have a band basically paying for the movie but not telling you what to do, which is, I still don't know how that happened. But when it came to distributing it, we didn't even get into the Chicago Film Festival, which I found very bizarre and very troubling in that it's a movie about one of the biggest bands of all time that is from this city, and we did not get in. But what we eventually had to do was we went and screened a really great film festival for a small city like Sedona. You wouldn't think, but they had, I think it was 14 days, and it really helped us because we won the festival. Lee Loughnane lives in Sedona, so it kind of proves the exception is if you know somebody at a film festival, I think it really helps. They'll say it doesn't, but I think it helps when you want to get a screening. It didn't hurt us that one of the founding members of Chicago lived in Sedona. And so we had our premiere, and it won the festival, and everyone seemed to really like the movie. And that was when we decided to go to Chicago's agent, which is CAA, and we asked them to help us sell the movie. And because we had won the festival, regardless of where it was, 2,000 people saw it that week, and it won the audience award. So it was apparently, I think, the highest rated movie they had in their history there. And CAA helped us, and we got a deal with the distributor FilmRise, but that was in probably March, about a month after the movie had premiered at Sedona. So we got the tentative oral deal pretty quickly, but as a young filmmaker, I had to wait 7 months before I could tell anybody because we had to wait for eventually CNN and FilmRise to make a joint announcement in the beginning of the month of November or even the end of the month. We're lucky that we had Chicago on our side and they're a known entity. I mean, getting distribution is a lot harder when you don't have that. But it's not as simple as, okay, you sell the movie and then you go and it airs or it comes out on Blu-ray. Like, there's a long waiting period most of the time because there's lawyers who are going over contracts, making sure everything's beneficial for both sides. There's a 5 to 6 page deliverable list that's 30 items per page that you have to get ready. And on the Chicago documentary, after filming, because I had a crew and I was lucky to have it financed, but once it came to the point of editing it, I was pretty much a one-man band in that I had to create and do almost everything besides the color correction and sound mix. So, you have things like making sure you have all the hard drives you have to send off. You have to make a DCP. You have to literally transcribe the movie. You have to do all these little things that have nothing to do with creativity. And it was kind of a sprint to the finish line. And once it aired, I was still kind of in that anxiety state where I thought I had something else to do, but I realized it's done. Time to step back. The distributor has all the assets. You're done with this movie. And it did take me 7 or 8 months after that to kind of really let go because I'd been working on it for so long. and to the point where I could like focus on making something else. So I know that was a long answer, but it's just how I experienced it.
I think that's a great answer. I did want to touch on a couple of things. As far as distribution being the wild pain in the ass, I think it was Quentin Tarantino was speaking to a bunch of film students. This was probably 15, 20 years ago. And, there was a whole crowd of college students, and he said, "Hey, who wants to be a director?" And the entire auditorium raised their hand. And he said, "Who wants to be a distributor?" And nobody raised their hand. And he said, "Look around. That's going to be a problem."
Mm-hmm.
I think he wasn't wrong, man.
Well, that's a problem. That's why it's so hard to find. I mean, we had a good distributor. They got our movie out there. But the problem is everyone wants to be the creative. Therefore, you don't really have any creatives. I don't want to say any. I mean, there's some places like, the place we got in A24. I mean, there are great distributors who have an eye for art. But when you don't have anybody who are interested in distribution who are also interested in art, it doesn't really make sense. They would go the other direction. They would be trying to make the art and not distribute the art. And that is not the fault of the distributors at all. I think that's probably what Tarantino is getting at, is that nobody cares about your art, really. Like, they care about what's going to make a profit and what's going to do well. And you have to kind of strike gold in order to make something that a lot of people want to see. In high school, I used to think, if I made a art film, that would be the one that would make millions of dollars. But this is going to sound ridiculous and far-fetched, but the real key is doing what Spielberg did and finding a way to inject art into entertainment. And I think that's what people forget to do, especially now. There's a lot of black and white in film now, where it's either or. The contrast is either it's extremely artistic and only cinephiles want to see it, or it's, you name it, Marvel movie, which are all extremely well made, but they serve one purpose, and that's just to be spectacle. And I would like to eventually get to where someone like Quentin Tarantino is he's able to create really interesting characters and really interesting artistic films that happen to be financially successful.
Also, you mentioned that you did have Final Cut on that project. How in the heck did you, I mean, I know you said it was in your contract, but how did you think to put that in there, and how did you get away with it, really?
I didn't have it in my contract to start, but I did make it pretty clear. I said, we're going to make this movie. I'm going to tell your story the way I see it, but you're being interviewed. So anything you say, rest assured, that's going to be in the movie, but I want you to be honest. I was surprised. It didn't really take much pushing for them to get personal. I think they were just ready to talk about all that stuff, because I think people had approached before and it was just not the right time. But they had worked with me for 3 years already. They saw that I could do good work. To be honest, in a certain sense, like, we were friendly at that point. So they knew I wasn't going to make a hit piece on them either, just like I would never make a hit piece on Danny Serafin or Peter Cetera if he had been in it. But the thing was, as I told them, I said, I'm going to make this, and, we already have the problem of you guys financing it, and we're going to be upfront about that. Because they wanted to own the movie. It's their story. No one else is coming to them to really make a big budget version of it. And I basically convinced them, I said, we can make a quote unquote big budget looking version of this if you let me, as a first time filmmaker, make this. I'll get the crew. We get freelance guys to come and do it for us at reasonable prices. You just need to trust me that I'm going to do a good job. And I'll obviously, if you see the movie and say that this part doesn't make sense or this isn't what happened, that I would consider it, like if I was factually inaccurate about a date or something like that. But it came to the point where I had finished the movie and literally no one in the band had seen it. I finished it without anybody. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, so I edited it in my apartment in Studio City. None of them live near me. Robert does, but he's not coming to my apartment to watch me edit. And I had finished the movie and showed it to them, and they didn't say anything. Like, I thought for sure, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I'm going to show it to these guys and they're going to say, oh, you didn't know. How come you say that? To take that out. Nobody said anything. So it was the de facto final cut at that point. And so at the end, when we were doing the contract, I think they just gave it to me. They just said, Peter Pardini has final cut. Nobody can change this movie without his approval. Because they had seen it and they saw it was good. And they saw that there was nothing that was going to make them look bad, in the sense that Nobody in the movie looks like an ass. You know, they're telling stories about firing people. That's obviously not going to sit well with everybody, but also they did fire those people and they admit to it on camera. So it's like, you're saying what you said. And there was the whole thing right after it came out where Danny Serafin had come out and basically called it fake news. And that always kind of hurt me because I had called Danny personally, but I had done everything I could to get him to do the movie. And we went to his house. He let us into his home very graciously. We shot an interview with him and I edited the film and I didn't change anything that he said. Everything in that movie that Danny Serafin is saying is what he is saying. So I didn't quite get the whole thing about how there were lies in it when it's his words. And the thing that really bothered me was how, not him, but with Peter Cetera, there were so many options for him to do the movie. And he came out after the movie and said, well, if I was in this movie, I would have said this, this, and this. And it's like, I see. These guys, they don't want to be part of it. It's painful for them. And for Danny especially, I think he watched the movie. He saw these guys that had basically kicked him out of the band 25 years ago or whatever it was at that point. And he had a really hard time watching 4 other opinions contradict his opinion. So to him, it felt like they were throwing him under the bus. But to me, it's like, I can't do anything else but show what the people who are interviewed are saying. You know what I mean? Like, you can't try to go easy on someone when there is no going easy. It's just what is in front of me. What these people are saying is what I have to put in. And I put as much of him in there as I could, but I don't have footage of Bill Champlin talking about it. I don't have footage of other people talking about it. And it was just that kind of thing that I completely own up to with having the final cut. Is I stand by the fact that I debated over each and every cut in that movie. And I did my best to show everyone whatever they believed the truth was going to go in there. And I'm really proud of it. It was on TV. Millions of people saw it. It's on Netflix now. It was #1 on Amazon. So clearly a lot of people liked it. And it's one of those learning curves for me as a director to know that not everyone's always going to be happy with what you've done, even people who are in the movie. And you can't really please everybody, but it's got to be a thing where you know that you're not pulling any punches and you're doing the best that you can and you're not being disingenuous, I guess.
One more question about the Chicago thing, and then we'll move on. You mentioned a deliverable list.
Right.
What the heck is that?
Well, so when you finish a movie, you know, you have the file on your computer. It's all digital. We shot some on film. We shot some on 16. But so when you have the movie done, you get it color corrected, you get it sound mixed, and you basically have it's called a QuickTime ProRes file. It's a ProRes 444 file, which is uncompressed, huge file. So it's like, for that movie, it was 2 hours. It was probably almost 200 gigabytes. So you have that. But then you get a list of what the distributor needs. So if you're going to air on CNN or you're going to go to Netflix, you need all these completely differing types of audio files because they're all different standards. If you're playing on TV, different audio setting than if you're playing in a theater. So it's a different audio setting than if you're playing on a TV network. And each network has their own specifications. So we could have never gone to HBO because HBO doesn't allow the bars on the top of the bottom.
The letterbox?
So the black bars on the top. Yeah, letterbox. They don't allow that, and it was burned into our image. We shot the movie like that because I wanted it to have that epic look. So there's certain things like that. So for instance, for CNN, we had to have a 5.1 mix, and it had to be in completely different audio settings than we had mixed it in. I mean, which is normal. I mean, it's you mix it one way, you mix it for theatrical, and then you mix it for broadcast. And so that's just one part of it. So there's that. The deliverables list is just literally a list of what you need to send to the distributor's office so they have it and they have backups. So that means you have to transcribe the movie so that they have the entire movie as a transcript. Then you have to get subtitles for the movie. And this is all still out of your pocket, by the way. The distributor doesn't pay for this. And the deal basically is you deliver all these items to them. They have the movie. They have the tapes, they have the backups of everything, they have the special features, they have yada, yada, yada. Then the deal is that after that, they do everything else. So they distribute They pay for the Blu-rays being made. They pay for the DVDs being made. So deliverables are basically just all the assets of the movie. Another one is you have to deliver the movie without titles at all. So it's completely blank so that they can use it in foreign markets and redub it and redo everything to it. In Japan and Italy specifically, I've seen clips online of the movie dubbed in Japanese and Italian. So it's just a really complicated thing that is very stressful to deliver, especially when it's just you doing it. But it's all worth it. I mean, it's been seen probably by 3-4 million people at this point, maybe more.
Oh, it's got to be more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost 2 million on CNN, and then it was number one on Amazon, and then now it's on Netflix. So yeah, maybe 10 million. Crazy.
That's awesome. So how does that feel? I mean, it sounds like it was opportunity and then a lot of hard work, and then it sounds like it kind of paid off a little bit. What do you think about it?
Oh, I love it. I mean, it kind of becomes not yours anymore in a good way. It's an entity. It's no longer, I mean, the first 2 years you're making it, everyone knows about it, and those are the only people that know about it. And so it kind of gets to a point where, you read a review of it and your name's in there, but that person doesn't know who you are. They're just looking at IMDb to find out who directed it, and then they put that into their article. And it's kind of cool, even if it's just one movie, and I accomplished what I had set out to do, is to kind of become part of the entertainment world where your name's being used without the person who's writing it knowing who you are. It doesn't happen for a lot of people, so I feel very grateful that when it was announced, my name was in Deadline and Variety, and it's just kind of cool to think. Now I can go around when people ask, before that, when people would ask what I do, I'd feel kind of sheepish about saying I'm a filmmaker, but now I am. I can say it. I have a film that people have actually seen, so it's really cool.
That is really cool. So I know that when The King of Kong came out, it was really well received, and subsequently that director got, a ton of phone calls and offer and buzz and all that. Did that happen with you after this film?
Not in that way. I think what happened with him was that Brett Ratner, who's now no longer working in the industry really, was trying to find a director for Horrible Bosses. And I think the story goes that he wanted to find somebody who had never done a big movie before, and I think he had seen King of Kong and thought it was so expertly put together that he hired that guy to do it. I think that's how it goes. But for me, there were a couple things that kind of got, as with a lot of projects, they kind of got started and then they stopped and it didn't really go anywhere. There was two other fairly big bands, I'm not going to say who they are, but there were two very big bands that approached me to do it, but there's not financing. It's really difficult to even get started on a documentary, especially when it's about music that will cost money at the end. Even if you could make a movie for $50,000, you're still going to have to pay for all that music, and there's no use in making a music documentary if you can't use the music. You shouldn't even do it because no one's going to want to watch it. If you do a movie about Elvis and there's no Elvis music in it, why would you do it? So none of them worked out, but it's all towards another thing. Like I have made two other feature films in between them that I figured out how to do for a low amount of money, and I called in favors and I got people to do them, and they both turned out well. And it's all about progressing. And now at this point, I'm working on Fat and finished with Fat, and I really think that it all happened for a reason, because I think that this documentary has the potential to really be seen by maybe even more people than the Chicago documentary, because when I would tell people I was working on the Chicago doc, they'd be, oh man, that's really cool. But it's kind of as far as it went. Just telling them you worked on it, there's not really a fervor behind it, unless you're a Chicago fan. But for this one, I have to say, have had 30-minute conversations with people about health and diet. Everyone thinks they're the gene and fitness, and I really think that's going to lend itself to people wanting to watch this movie en masse.
Now, what Peter is talking about right now is a movie. It's a documentary called Fat, a documentary. Is that the full title? Fat, a documentary?
Yeah.
We're going to touch on that a little bit later. I kind of want to finish with that. So we're going to set Fat aside just for right now. And I want to talk about Black Cat.
Okay. Perfect.
What do
you want to know about it?
Well, you said that you, since the Chicago thing, you have made two more films. Is Black Cat one of them?
Yes, it is. And I'm really excited to talk about it because no one ever asks about it. So thank you in advance.
It won a shitload of film festivals. and awards and whatnot, so why wouldn't everybody want to talk to you about that?
My whole theory is this. I'll point to another person. So Damien Chazelle, right? Do you know that name?
Yeah, he did La La Land, right?
Mm-hmm. Everyone thinks his first movie. Yes, everyone thinks his first movie is Whiplash, but it's actually another movie called Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench, and it's a really low budget, like $30,000 feature film that he made, I think in 2009. I want to say that it's really good, but it cost $30,000, and nobody saw it except I think Stanley Tucci saw it, the actor, and he got behind it, and then they got a release for it, and it kind of didn't really do anything. And that was his first movie, and it came about 5 years before Whiplash. So for me, I feel like Black Cat, if I do achieve what I'm setting out to achieve, then it's going to start being seen. We did the same thing we did film festivals as we did the Chicago one to start with, and then we submitted to every big film festival. And there's just the truth of it. And it's not because these festivals are evil or because they have an agenda. It's just when you're Sundance and you get tens of thousands of submissions and you can have only 100 features at the most, how the hell is anybody going to get into that? You know, you're not going to. And they end up having to accept movies that have bigger names in them, big celebrities, regardless of whether they say that that's, you know, because of the star power or not. It's going to influence you. If you have to choose between the really low budget movie made by some guys in Fresno or a sort of low budget movie with Viola Davis, the human nature is going to select the Viola Davis one, and you're just going to say that it was better because your mind's telling you it's better. That's my theory. I could be wrong. But with Black Cat, we didn't get into anything, and I thought, I'm just going to go on to Film Freeway and Without a Box. Those are two submission websites for film festivals. It's an aggregator for festivals where you can submit digitally. And I just said, I'm going to go through, I'm going to write down all of these email addresses for every festival head, and I'm just going to basically write the same email, but manually go in and change words here and there for every single festival. They'll spend 2 days doing it. I'll send 500 emails, and we'll see what happens. And lo and behold, probably half gave me a submission waiver, and I told him, I said, we don't have any money. Like, we want to submit to your film festival, but, you know, we want to submit to a lot of other film festivals too, and we just don't have the budget to do it. And they will most likely give you, if not a full waiver, they'll give you an 80% off. So you're only spending $5, but they still get something out of it. And we got into well over 100. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but we did win well over 10, possibly 20 film festivals. We were finalists in a lot of them. Our whole thought, Grant and I, who made the movie together, our whole thought was, if we get into 115 film festivals, and let's say an average of 50 to 100 people watch them at all those film festivals, that's thousands of people who are going to see the movie. And those are people. And these are smaller film festivals. So those people really want to go to a film festival and really want to watch movies. So you're finding people in, like, Kingsville, Tennessee, I think is one of them. Or Kingston, Tennessee. I got emails from people after they saw the movie. They found me on Facebook or whatever when I had Facebook. And they would find me and they would go, man, I love Black Cat. And it was really kind of a cool experience to hear from strangers all over the country. And sometimes one guy in India was like, I saw your film today at this film festival in Bangladesh or wherever it was. I really enjoyed it. Most of the people didn't because it doesn't have music at the end, because in India they want a musical number at the end, but they don't know what they're talking about. I want to move to America and be a filmmaker. It was really cool because Black Cat was born out of my friend Grant and I. We wanted to make a feature film, but we don't have access to, even though I had made a documentary that cost over $1 million, that's a documentary about a band that everyone knows. I'm not able to just go out and find $1 million to do a feature film, though I wish I could. It wasn't in the cards. So instead of sitting around sulking, we were like, let's figure out a way to do a movie for no money. We'll shoot it in 10 days and we'll make the best of it. And so I conceived of this idea of kind of, the concept of the movie is that there's this adult man-child who's making a true crime documentary, but he's not a filmmaker, and he's this just kind of rich trust fund kid who's a complete failure in his life, and he's trying to make a true crime documentary like, you know, Making a Murderer or The Jinx. And we would meld narrative with documentary to the point that when he sits down and interviews someone for the documentary, we could actually have this actor playing this guy interview the other person. I could give them a backstory, and they could basically improvise the whole movie. That's how we did that movie. But what it ended up happening is we had an 85-minute feature film that turned out, I mean, we got some actors in it who I'm amazed they were able to do what they did with the improv, because I just gave everyone a little bit of a character backstory, and I said, you're going into this interview knowing this, this, and this, and then everything was just completely improvised. And I said, don't worry if you stumble through anything, because I'm not showing your whole 40-minute interview in the movie. We're going to see like 3 minutes of it. I'll be able to cut around anything that you do. And that's what we did. And it turned out really well. And it got into a bunch of film festivals. It won a lot. It's cool now because it's now out on iTunes. And, it's a thing where it's not a Chicago documentary. It's not a documentary about something that a lot of people like inherently care about or would like go out and try to find. It's a completely original idea. And when you don't have a name behind yourself as a narrative filmmaker, it's just not going to hit right away unless you're lucky enough to get into a big film festival. So at this point, it's out there. It's available for people to see, but time will tell when it gets seen by more people.
Sure. So you said it's available on iTunes. Is it available on Amazon also?
No, just iTunes. And it's available for rent and purchase. I think to buy it, it's $12.99, but then to rent it, it's only, I think, $3.99.
Gotcha. You talked a lot about Grant, but you didn't give us his last name. What's Grant's last name?
Grant Gary.
Grant Gary.
I've known him since grade school, and we went to high school together. Yeah, we've always just made movies, and we made a short film a few years ago, or 7 years ago. Jesus. And, we've just been friends for a long time, and we were able to shoot everything in Fresno, where we're from, for free, because we know a lot of people, and they just, you want to use the restaurant for 5 hours, you can come in and shoot, we're not going to charge you. Whereas in Los Angeles, the most recent movie I did, we rented a house, and it was like $5,000 for one day.
Wow.
And yeah, we can get to that project later, but that was a whole other deal where we could kind of spend more money and less at the same time. I know it doesn't make sense, but I could explain it.
Is it less because of incentives and things like that?
Well, the newer one, Rolling Thunder, was a feature film that we actually shot in one day. Shot the whole feature film in one day. And the concept surrounding that was very similar to what I did with Black Cat. So a little backstory on this. So in Black Cat, there's a whole scene in the movie where it's a flashback and we're put onto a film set, and we're basically seeing the behind the scenes, quote unquote, behind the scenes footage of a film set gone wrong. And that was a whole day of filming for us on Black Hat, where again, I gave everyone character stories, and it was like, okay, here's the script for the film that you're making. But other than that, I'm not going to direct you. I want the guy playing the director to be directing the set. And we'll just film with 2 or 3 behind-the-scenes cameras, and we'll capture all the footage, and I'll jump in every now and then to say, oh, say this, say this. But other than that, it's only going to be 3 minutes of the movie. Again, I can just cut around it and make a scene out of it and just kind of show film set gone wrong aspect. But what actually ended up happening was at the end of last year, after Black Cat had come out, I remembered how funny that day was, because it was so hilarious. The main actor and the director, their interplay with each other, of this like director who cannot communicate with the actor. He can't get him to do the line right. Everything he does is wrong. And I was remembering how funny that was. And I thought, I wonder if I could take that footage, if I strung it out on an editing timeline and I kind of cut the fluff out, how long would that be? So I went in and did that, and it was about 60 minutes, and I watched it. It's actually really funny. It works as its own thing, as an hour-long thing. And I thought, we didn't even try to do this. What if I could find, through all of my success with Chicago, through just people knowing that I had released Black Cat and it had won a bunch of awards, I wonder if I could find some supporters who would invest in a movie. If I could get $40,000, I could shoot a feature film in one day. and basically just do this, not the same story, but just the same kind of idea of film set gone wrong. I could ask Chicago if they'd be in it. I could ask Joe Mantegna, who I'd worked with before, if he could be in it. I could ask Wes Studi, the actor who's in Last of the Mohicans and Heat and a bunch of other things, Hostiles. I had recently become acquainted with him. I could ask him if he could do it, because I figured we're only shooting for one day and we have $40,000 to work with. I mean, that's over $1 million movie if you stretch that out over 30 to 40 days. So it's technically a lot of money per day. And I was able to convince Chicago to be in it. I was able to convince Mantegna, Wes Studi, Serena Scott Thomas, who I'm working with on the documentary Fat. She's known for being in a bunch of different movies.
Serena is a previous guest of this show, and also, more important than anything else, she is a Bond girl.
Yep. So she's a Bond girl. She was in one of my favorite directors' movies, Inherent Vice, and she's amazing. But I got all these people who are really great at what they do to be on set, and it was amazing because the whole concept of the movie, it's very simple. It's a millennial director, has a huge budget short film that's just awful, and he's convinced all these people to be in his movie, but no one knows what's going on. And I was going to do the same exact thing I did with Black Hat. I gave everybody like a 2-page backstory on who they were, what they knew going in, and I had 6 or 7 behind-the-scene cameras going at all times, and my whole intent was, I'm going to let this actor, Jake Armbruster, who's the lead, he's going to play the director, and I will develop the movie with him so that he knows exactly what's going on at all times. But he's going to be the only one that knows. We're going to have a real crew on set, who's the crew that I've worked with forever. We're going to have real actors show up. We're going to have Chicago show up to be in this fake short film. But I'm not going to direct beyond little things that I'm hearing and seeing. And we're going to document the entire day as if it's a real day on set. And we now have a 90-minute feature film. So that one I'm really excited about. We're still waiting to hear from some festivals, but the same thing happens where we don't get in any big ones. We'll just tour the country with it and go to smaller places and still get thousands of people watch it. It has some names in it. It has a unique concept. I don't know anybody who's ever made a feature film in one day. I think it's the only one. And I'm really excited about it. It will eventually break through. It just has to.
Very cool. So it's about to be maybe on the festival circuit? That's where it's at right now?
About to be. It's been done for 4 or 5 months, but you submit early and then you don't hear for 6 or 7 months, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So we submitted to the big ones, but we're waiting to hear, and then we'll decide where to go. But we know we have something here. I mean, you see these people, like you see Joe Mantegna, who's, Criminal Minds, Godfather 3, and a bunch of Woody Allen movies. He shows up to set, and he did not know what was going on, which is exactly what I wanted. You can't explain a concept like this to an actor who wants to prepare, but I just said, Joe, just trust me. Show up to set. Here's the script for the short film that we're shooting. So there was an actual script for this fake short film. And I said, just learn those lines, and that's all you need to know. Otherwise, you're just Joe Mantegna going to set. And there's this whole 10-minute scene in the middle of the movie where they're trying to shoot this really bad father-daughter scene. And he has all these questions about, like, what's my motivation for this? What's my motivation for that? And everything's so perfectly natural because, like when we first got to set, it was a little touch and go because people were trying to perform. They were trying to be funny. It wasn't really working for like the first hour. But at a certain point, when I don't step in and you're actually listening to this guy who's playing a director and he's a giant asshole, the character, pretty soon people start acting the part and it's just like they're on a really bad film. And it was really cool to see what would happen if Joe Mantegna was in a bad film shoot and he was butting heads with the director, and what would happen if Wes Studi was there as well. He and Joe Mantegna during the day started forming a bond with each other to kind of go against the director, but that wasn't in the script. Like they were just kind of doing it naturally. And then Chicago shows up and they're like, who the hell is this kid? To the fake director, but it's only fake in as much as it's not like a real consequence of a bad short film, but you do have this real situation that's happening and everyone is acting as if. And that's one of my pet peeves about mockumentaries is that everything feels staged and everything feels like a line that was written, but that's not what ours is like. It actually ends up being almost like a deleted episode of Project Greenlight.
Wow.
And you can find the trailer for that, too, on Vimeo. If you just search Rolling Thunder trailer Peter Pardini, it'll come up.
Can I put a link to that trailer in the show notes?
Absolutely.
All right, I will do that. I just want to touch on one other thing real quick before we talk about Fat, and that is I watched Bad Reputation over the weekend.
Oh, yeah? And?
I really like the way that you use the old radio clips and the news clips and whatnot. At first, I thought that, because I was watching it on my computer, and I thought my computer was messing up. I'm like, because it starts off, I want to say, on a beach, and then there's just this, like, these old, news clips, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I, like, restarted my computer and started it over. And that was a very interesting approach to that, because there wasn't a whole lot of dialogue, especially maybe, like, in the first act, I guess, or the first section of it.
Yeah.
What made you come up with the idea to use those radio clips and the news clips, and did you have to pay for all that?
Okay. Here's the story of Bad Reputation. We made that 10 years ago, and it started as a feature-length script about a serial killer who is trying to get fame, and it kind of went from there. I'm really interested in a kind of a Coen Brothers, Paul Thomas Anderson kind of approach to a story about a serial killer, because right after There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men came out in 2007, in the beginning of 2008, I started writing this feature. And I wrote the whole thing, and being a college student, I was naive and thinking, we can find someone to give us money to make this. That didn't happen. And so we decided that we would just do a trailer for the movie to see if we could make something. We'd shoot it on film. We could get everybody to work for free because it was college. But you could get all the people that worked on it, like the cinematographer is the guy I've worked with every single time, John Honore. And he's done everything I've ever shot. And everyone's in college at that point. So everyone worked for free, but all those people now are like really high-priced craftsmen of what they do. So it's kind of amazing. I look back at that short film, and I wanted to figure out how much would that have cost us. It was $5,000 then for the whole thing. And it wasn't intended to go to film festivals. It was just intended, this is going to be a trailer, and we can put any music we want into it because we're not making money off of it. It's just going to be solely a trailer that will show the tone of the movie. And I calculated if we had added in all the music, all of the people who worked on it, it would have been well over $1 million just for those 15 minutes. And so originally, I don't know if they're still online, but you can actually go and look up Crook's trailer, and I think it was probably 2009, and it's just a 2.5-minute trailer, and that's why there's not a lot of dialogue, is because the scenes were never intended to be full scenes. They were just supposed to be little cuts in a trailer. And one of the funny things is that the guy who's in that, one of the guys who's in that, the guy who plays the kind of dopey sheriff's deputy,
Kyle Mooney?
That was 10 years ago.
Yeah, he's on Saturday Night Live, and when I saw him, I was like, holy shit, how did this happen? But, like you said,
well, we got him before he was, we got him.
He looks exactly the same.
Guy. I know. He doesn't age.
That's amazing.
So we shot that, and it was 2.5 minutes worth, but then I was bored at the beginning of last year, and, I work from home. I'm fortunate enough to work from home. So there will be 3 or 4 days sometimes in a row where I'm like, I got to find something to do. And I went back and looked at all that footage and thought, if I could put this into 4 parts and just kind of make the scenes longer and just kind of see, maybe I could eventually go back to that script, touch it up, make it better, and then I could use this as kind of a pitch for a TV series, because I think it might have a good plausibility for that. And the change to it that came after we made it was, I'm really into history, as you could probably tell from doing documentaries, and, just all of my ideas tend to be period pieces anyways. But I was reading about the Reagan assassination attempt, because I think it might have been like an anniversary of it or something. Yeah, it probably was the 20-year anniversary, 30-year anniversary in 2011. And I thought, that's kind of an interesting angle, is maybe this movie's set in 1981. There's this serial killer who's trying to get attention for being a great serial killer, but then he sees that John Hinckley Jr. shot the president but failed, and he's famous. And so this pisses this guy off, and he wants to go out and make a name for himself because he can't stand the idea that this guy failed at doing this thing and he's famous. There's some anachronisms in there because we didn't shoot it that way, but it still sort of works. It's a movie about, on the one hand, you have this serial killer, and then on the other hand, you have this cop who is also a bad guy, but he's pretending not to be. And so it's kind of that interesting morality play between, here's a guy who knows he's bad and doesn't make any qualms about it. And here's another guy who is bad, but doesn't know it and won't admit to it. And, I might go back to that, but man, you're going deep here. So I'm flattered.
Well, thank you. I was very excited to talk to you, so I wanted to at least be sort of prepared.
That's always good. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So today I went to my pulmonologist. A pulmonologist, for those who don't know, is a lung doctor. So I've had bad lungs and asthma my entire life. And when I first started going to this pulmonologist in June of 2016, I was only using 40% of my lungs. And at that time, I weighed 235 pounds. Now, when I went to see him that first time, he prescribed me 3 daily inhalers and an emergency inhaler. And it was about a year later, I started doing no sugar, no grain, which is NSNG, because I heard Vinnie Tortorich on the Adam Carolla show, and he was talking about it a lot. So I decided to dip my baby toe in, so to speak. And I'm not going to lie, I was not very diligent. I mean, I tried to be here and there, but, I wasn't a Nazi about it. It was so, I don't say that I was NSNG. I say I was NSNG-ish.
Right. I think that's everyone when they start.
Yeah, I think probably. So that was in May of 2017 is when I basically started doing that. And after 6 months, so December of 2017, I went back to my pulmonologist, and he took me down to 2 daily inhalers, and I had lost about 10 or 12 pounds. Today, like I said, I went back to that doctor, and now I weigh 195. So I've lost, 40 pounds. And he took me down to 1 inhaler. So I hadn't planned on talking about that, but since it happened today, I wanted to bring that up. The doctor did talk. Great. Thank you. The doctor talked a lot about, he said, what we used to believe is that the reason that losing weight helps with your breathing is because of the mechanics of all of that fat pressing against your lungs and your diaphragm, making it difficult to breathe. But he said, while that is true, what we've learned fairly recently is that fat cells have an inflammation retention. And so what that means is that the more fat cells you have, the more easily triggered inflammation of all kinds is. And asthma at its core is inflammation. So he said that the new way of thinking in that area is that not only the mechanics of the fat preventing you from, literally breathing with your diaphragm and your lungs, but also reducing the amount of fat cells reduces the inflammation retention in your body in general. And so I thought that was kind of really timely since I was going to be having you on today. And now let's talk about Fat, the documentary.
My name is Vinnie Tortorich, and I've been in the health and fitness game for the better part of 40 years. Over the years, I've seen everything come and go at least 100 times.
You're a good Chris. You ready to do the workout? You just shake it.
But as a country, we've only gotten fatter. In 1968, Senator McGovern decided to study what the best diet would be, not only for the United States, but something that the whole world can live on.
Some of the smartest scientists called this a huge experiment in which the American public were the subjects.
They're surprisingly consistent in their recommendation for moderate fat, eating plenty of fruits and vegetables and whole grain products.
Low cholesterol, no cholesterol, lowers cholesterol.
Good fat, bad fat, low fat, non-fat. The myths have become ingrained in our society far too strongly for people to realize they're myths. And I realized there was this incredible story that we had gotten it pretty much completely upside down and backward on fat.
Do I think the government was complicit in causing this problem? Yes. Do I think they meant to do it? Absolutely not.
I mean, imagine the press release you would have to write. Dear American public, we're sorry if we killed loved ones and your parents, and maybe we're killing you, but in retrospect, we shouldn't have given the advice we did.
I have pleaded in my report and will plead again orally here for more research on the problem before we make announcements to the American public.
In a curious situation where I'm just reminding people of something that we've known for 150 years.
Why are these nutrition scientists just not more curious about other ideas? I was at a conference recently where we talked about a low-carb study where they reversed the diagnosis of diabetes. Did you hear that? That was 60% reversal of diabetes. Should that not be headline news, and should you not be curious?
People attach themselves to one particular approach to diet, and it develops into an identity.
There are powerful forces at work in our medical system that have nothing to do with good health.
If you think it's up to government, you're wrong. If you think it's up to industry, you're wrong. It's up to you. And if you're going to make a change, start now. There's no time better than right now to get your life in order.
How did you meet and get involved with Vinnie Tortorich and this project?
Same exact way that you did. I heard him on Corolla. I had been on Corolla before. I listened to his podcast, and I did the same thing. I started kind of dipping my toe in NSNG, and that was right when he first appeared on Corolla. So, I didn't really do it. It was a thing of where it's like trying to find all the cheats that you can do. Well, if I have this, it has no sugar in it, but it still has sugar. You have to get past that hump. But for me, I really started last, I would say August of 2017. And I immediately dropped about 15 pounds, and that was probably mostly water weight at that point. But that didn't happen with any other diet for me. And I thought, well, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't care what anyone says about cholesterol or blood pressure or any of that, because it's going up eating the other way too. So I might as well do this. And I keep losing weight. And at a certain point, the Blu-ray release of the Chicago documentary, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and Vinnie happens to be the guest, and I was talking to Gary, producer Gary. I said, oh, I love Vinnie. I've been following NSNG for a long time. So it was my time to go in, and I just went in and I grabbed Vinnie by the shoulder because he was turned the other way, and I said, hey, I bought your book a couple years ago. I've been following NSNG. I know I don't look like I have, but I'm losing weight. He looked me up and down. He did the judgment right in front of me. He goes, how long you been on it? And I was like, a couple months. He's like, how much do you weigh? And I'm like, 240. And he's like, okay, here's my phone number. Call me. So it was just going to be a thing where he's going to give me a consult because I was on the show. And we ended up talking a few months later because I had lost the phone number, I think. And I don't know how I was so ashamed of myself because I really wanted to talk to him, not for any other reason that I just wanted advice. I wanted to see if I was doing everything right. Ultimately, I sent an email. I didn't want to tweet at him because I thought that was a little weird, but I sent an email, and it didn't go to his personal email. It was whatever the email is that's on the list, and it took about a month because he gets a lot of those. Ultimately, he responded because someone else told him that I had messaged, whatever, and we talked on the phone, and we set up a time for me to come on the podcast, and that was end of February of just this last year, and we did that first podcast together. And after it ended, we decided, this is no joke, we literally decided at the end of that podcast as we were talking that we were going to make a movie. And I honestly didn't know how it was going to happen because we didn't have money. I told him we need about $200,000. That's what we're going to need. That's cheap for a documentary. Everyone's telling you $500,000, but I promise you we can do it for $200,000. And I honestly, I thought, we could do a movie about the history of health myths. That might be interesting. And he was interested in it, but I didn't know how it was going to actually work, but I knew it would because I liked his personality. A lot of these health docs, they don't have someone at the center of it who's really interesting. And I think Vinnie's strongest asset, besides his ability to get people to lose and keep off weight, is that he's a convincer. He can convince people. He's interesting. There's something about him that's like off kilter to what you would think someone who knows all this stuff would look and sound like. And I thought, we'll at least have that. And he's got a huge following, so we can probably do an Indiegogo, and we can probably, he spent his own money on it too. And so that was the end of February. I think it was the beginning of March when we actually did the podcast. I think within 2.5 months we had started the Indiegogo. So that's March, April, May. We were shooting it at the end of July, so it was really only about 4 months later that we were shooting it. And then we finished shooting it at the end of August, and now it's finished. So that's definitely a much different story than the Chicago documentary. But Vinnie and I are both like, no bullshit. Like, let's just do this. Let's not lie to each other. Let's not say, oh, it's going to take this long when it really doesn't. We could go to a low-carb convention, and we can shoot interviews with all the people that are there, and we shoot it in 2 days, and we save probably about $100,000 doing that. And shoot it in your house in LA. And we'll shoot that over 2 days, and we'll fly somebody in if we have to, but that'll be a lot cheaper than traveling a crew. And it's turned out, I'm really excited. I'm excited about both Rolling Thunder and this one probably even more, because it feels like right now this NSNG keto thing is really, it's becoming more than just an infomercial about lose weight in 2 weeks. Like, it's a paradigm shift. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme in terms of the metaphor of get-rich-quick. It's not a like, okay, I can do this diet, and in 2 weeks I'm going to be where I want to be, and then I can go off of it. It's a diet that you do, and then once you're in the groove of it, I can't imagine, like, I've been on it now for religiously, probably for a year religiously. I still have my, as he puts it, life into living days, but I don't miss that stuff at all. I used to eat fast food 2-3 times a week. I didn't have Taco Bell for an entire year, which I didn't think could ever happen. Yeah, seriously. No, I'm not kidding. I would go 2-3 times a week, and that was with me trying not to go. It was an addiction. And once I kicked that addiction, all of my blood numbers got better. My cholesterol went down. My doctor was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, well, I ketogenic diet, basically, because I knew she wouldn't know what NSNG was. But I just said, basically ketogenic diet. She's like, okay, all right. But then they took my blood pressure, and it was normal for last year's standards, but they changed the standards this year. So she's like, oh, you heard your blood pressure's worrying me. And then she wanted to put me on this diet that had all these grains and stuff. And I said, no, not going to do that. I'm just nervous here, because I went and measured it at Ralph's a couple days later, and it was normal. So for me, this documentary is important, whereas I think that the Chicago one was important culturally, but listening to classic rock's not going to change anyone's life now. And I think that this movie really could help people change their lives, because we don't put pressure on the viewer to say, you have to follow this diet or you will die. The movie's just about showing people, where did veganism come from? Where did low fat come from? We kind of just accept that these things are scientifically accurate. And when you learn that the low fat trend came, basically, if you want to boil it down, it came because they couldn't find anything, and they just decided that was what they were going to go with, because there was some evidence pointing that people who ate lots of fat also had heart attacks, but there wasn't really any strong causation. It was all correlation. That's one of the things we get into. But when you see just where these things came from, and then you see, oh, well, this guy cured his kid's seizures with the ketogenic diet. These people basically reduced 90% of their kids' type 1 diabetes with this, the symptoms of it at least. You show the results versus telling people you have to do this or you're going to die. Like, our country and world's nutritional stuff, and just news in general, is based almost solely on fear. And that's not really the way. I think that's one of the reasons why Vinny's been successful, is this guy's like genuinely trying to help people, and it's a lifestyle change that is going to benefit you and make you feel better. And once you get over that addiction, but also just that almost a brainwashing of, wait, no, low fat. Or if I just count calories, it's like nothing's ever worked for me. I've dipped and gained weight my entire life, but it's always been cutting carbs for me. And I don't know. I'm not just an N1 experiment on that. I mean, it's working for you. It's working for everyone I know who's trying it and doing it. Not just trying it, but actually doing it. And we hope that we were suggestive enough in the movie that people will want to try it regardless, because it's their idea, not because we told them to.
That makes sense. Real quick, the podcast that Peter was talking about with Vinny is called Fitness Confidential. It's Vinny's podcast. I think he does it, 5 or 7 days a week or something. He's pretty prolific with that.
Yeah.
I don't know really what the numbers mean in blood pressure, but when I had it taken today, it was 120/83. I don't know what the number was, but I know what the number is, and I'm assured that is a good
perfect.
Thing. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, 120/80 is optimal, so you're in a good spot there. Mine was like 132/91, and that was normal last year according to guidelines, but this year for some reason they decided that it wasn't. So I was only 2 points on either end, I think, higher than the high end of normal. But once I went to Ralph's a couple days later, it was normal, 120/80. So a little bit of the white coat syndrome.
Sure, yeah, I bet. So I think I've kept you long enough. So as we're heading out, Peter, can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media?
Sure. Peter_Pardini on Twitter, and it's at Peter Pardini on Instagram. And then my website is peterpardini.com.
Thank you. And lastly, is there anything that we didn't talk about or that I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think you touched on everything. Got to talk about everything I am proud of that I've done. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, since you put it that way, tell me one thing in your whole life that you're not proud of.
Quitting basketball when I was in high school.
playing basketball at 240 pounds can't be easy, man.
I was thin in high school. I was thin. I played basketball in high school, and it just wasn't fun, and I quit. But I went to every game after that, though. I would go and watch every game, and we had 3 future NBA players on our high school team, so that was fun to watch. But I do kind of wish I had stuck it out, but I still, at the same time, I wouldn't change anything. It all happened for a reason.
That's a great answer. Peter Pardini, thank you so very much for taking the time to hang out with me. Oh, we don't have any clue of even when we will find out a date that you will find out about a release date for Fat, right?
Not yet, but we are in discussions right now with several different places, so hopefully very soon we'll know.
Cool. Peter Pardini, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us today. I super appreciate it, and I am so looking forward to seeing this movie that I helped make.
Thank you so much for that. You're a contributor. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I had Vinnie on during the initial phase of the campaign, and I think he got a couple of backers off of that too. So very excited.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You are most welcome. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I am wearing my t-shirt that says Fat, a documentary.
Nice.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter. You have a great rest of your week, okay?
You too. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Take it easy. Hey, guys. This is Steve Owens from Fascination Street Podcast here with a very important message. I'm awesome. I bet you thought I was going to say something else, but nope. What's important here is that I am awesome. I started this show because I truly believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear those stories. In the short time I've been doing this show, I've interviewed actors, directors, writers, inventors, podcasters, musicians, pro athletes, Olympic athletes, actual war heroes, even a Bond girl and a luthier, whatever the hell that is, and of course, regular people. From people who wanted to be stars but never gave it a real try, to big company CEOs and people who got to meet their favorite president. I love getting to meet and speak with people who have a story to tell. I feel like everyone does, and it's my job to get them to tell it. You never know who my next guest will be. An Academy Award-winning actor, a platinum-selling musician, or your own mother-in-law. But one thing is for certain, you will be fascinated by their story. So come take a walk with me down Fascination Street. You can find Fascination Street Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and of course, FascinationStreetPod.com. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.